There's this question. It's right at the heart of everything, but it's so big, so fundamental that we've totally forgotten it even exists. So today, think of us as philosophical detectives. We're going to go on a mission to uncover this forgotten mystery.
All right, let's start with a little thought experiment. Just think for a second. What is the most important, the most used word in any language? I'm not just talking about English here. I mean pretty much every language on the planet.
It's this word we throw around all the time, right? In almost every single sentence, and we never ever stop to think about it. Okay, you ready? It's some form of the verb to be. Is, are, am. Think about it. We say, the sky is blue. You are here right now. I am talking. It's the glue holding our entire reality together in language.
And that right there is where things get really interesting. We all use this word, but what does is actually mean? What are we really saying when we say something is? It sounds like such a simple, almost a kid's question, right? But that exact question is the launch pad for the entire philosophy of Martin Heidegger. For him, this was no grammar lesson. No, this was the forgotten mystery of all of Western civilization. So, to start cracking this case, Heidegger gives us our first big clue. And trust me, it's a distinction so fundamental that once you get it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. It's the difference between what he calls being and beings. All right, first up, let's tackle beings, or as Heidegger would say in German, Seiendes. Now this is the easy part. A being is basically any thing we can point to or talk about. Your phone, the chair you're in, the planet, even your own feelings, you, me, all of these are individual beings. They're the whats of our world, the nouns. But then you have being, with a capital B, Sein in German. And this is where your brain has to do a little flip, because being isn't a thing. It's not another item on the list of beings. Here's an analogy that might help. Imagine beings are all the pieces of furniture in a room. Being is the light that fills that room, the very thing that lets you see the furniture at all. We spend all our time looking at the couch and the table, and we totally, completely forget about the light itself.
You see how crucial this is? Beings are the particular things. They're the answer to the question, what is it? But being is that background isness, the very presence that allows anything to show up for us in the first place. It is the deep mystery hiding in plain sight inside that tiny little word, is.
And this all leads to one of Heidegger's most famous and kind of mind-bending statements. Das Sein ist nicht seiend. It means being is not a being. And what he's saying is, you can't go looking for being like it's just another object. You're not going to find it under a microscope. You can't write a formula for it. The moment you treat being like just another being, well, that's the fundamental mistake that sends you down the wrong path.
Heidegger has a name for this, by the way. He calls it the ontological difference. It's this super important fundamental dividing line between being itself, that light in the room, and all the countless beings, the furniture. And for Heidegger, this isn't just some clever philosophical party trick. No, he thinks it's the single most important distinction we can possibly make. And the entire history of our culture, of Western thought, is basically the story of how we forgot it. So you gotta be asking, how on earth could we forget something so basic, so fundamental? Well, according to Heidegger, it wasn't just some accident. It wasn't a simple mistake. In a strange way, it was kind of our destiny to forget.
Listen to this incredible claim Heidegger makes. He says, Die Geschichte des Seins begins mit der Seinsvergessenheit, which means the history of being begins with the forgetfulness of being. Wow. So from the very get-go, from the moment philosophy first started asking big questions, we were already getting it wrong. We were immediately focusing on the furniture and completely forgetting about the light.
And he even gave this process a name, a very German name, of course, Seinsvergessenheit. It just means the forgetfulness of being. It describes this long, slow historical drift where we became absolutely obsessed with studying and measuring and controlling all the individual beings in the world. And during that whole process, the original question, what does it even mean to be? It just faded away. And you can literally watch this happening throughout history. The ancient Greeks, they got so close. They touched on the question of being, but then they immediately got distracted by studying beings. What are things made of? What causes them? Then later, metaphysics just turned being into the highest being, like God, or just the most general category. Again, they were still treating it like a thing. And then,
bam, modern science comes along and becomes the absolute master of beings, right? We can measure and control the what's of pretty much everything, but we've totally forgotten how to even ask about the is.
Okay, so if we've completely forgotten the question, how in the world do we start to remember it? Where do we even begin? Heidegger says we have to find the right starting point. We need to find the one unique being that can be our lead investigator in this whole mystery.
I mean, that's the big problem, isn't it? If being isn't a being, if it's not something you can just pick up and look at, how can you possibly investigate it? Where do you even point your flashlight?
This is where Heidegger makes his most brilliant move. He says, look, we have to start by analyzing the one being for whom being is already a question. The one being whose very existence is all about figuring out what it means to be, even if it doesn't realize it.
And yeah, you guessed it, that being is us. Heidegger gives us a special name, though, to get away from all the old ideas tied to words like human or person. He calls us Dasein. As he puts it, Dasein is the being which we ourselves in each case are. And the word literally just means being there.
So what's so special about us, about Dasein? Well, think about a rock. A rock exists, sure, but it's not concerned about its existence. It's not sitting around wondering about its purpose. But we are. Our own being is an issue for us. We're the ones asking, who am I? What's my purpose here? What should I do? We are the opening, the there where the whole question of being can even show up. That's why we're the key to the entire investigation.
Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds really abstract, right? But Heidegger insisted that this forgotten mystery has very real and honestly very dangerous consequences for our modern lives, especially in our technological age.
Heidegger believed that our era, right now, is the absolute peak of this forgetfulness of being. He said that in our time, complete forgetfulness of being reigns. We've become so totally obsessed with all the beings around us that we have zero time left for the question of being itself.
So what does that look like in the real world? Well, it's our modern technological mindset. It's the way we've learned to see everything, and I mean everything, as just a resource to be used and optimized. A forest stops being a forest and becomes a pile of lumber waiting to be harvested. A river isn't a living force of nature, it's just potential megawatts of electricity. Even we do this to ourselves, right? Our time isn't for living, it's a resource to be managed for maximum productivity. Everything is just turned into what Heidegger called a standing reserve, just stuff on standby, waiting for us to use it.
And the human cost of this way of thinking is, well, it's huge. Because in this world, we ourselves become just another resource to be managed, another being on the list. Heidegger has this really powerful phrase for it. He says we become a slave of the forgetfulness of being. We completely forget our special role as Dasein, the questioner, and we just become cogs in a giant, impersonal, and ultimately meaningless machine that we built.
And that is how this ancient philosophical mystery lands right on our doorstep today. In our world, a world filled with more things, more information, more beings than at any point in human history, have we completely lost sight of what it even means to simply be? That's the powerful question Heidegger leaves us with. And you have to admit, it's a question that seems to matter now more than ever.